One of the best stories I had about Nixon was, it was Christmas Eve of 1970, and the wire service photographers and reporters are just always there until they're told by the press staff that they have a lid for the day, meaning no more news will be committed by the president. And it was getting late, and we were in the press room. Everybody else had gone home. It was I and Harvey Georges, the AP photographer, Gene Risher, UPI, who was filling in for Helen Thomas, and a couple other people, I can't remember. We were just sitting there, and Ron Ziegler came into the press room, and he said, okay, you guys come with me. And so I grabbed the cameras, and Harvey and I both took up our cameras. He said, no photos. You can't bring your camera along. And it's like, okay. I mean, we have no idea what's going on. So he leads us out of the West Wing, down the stairs, up the stairs of the executive office building to these big doors. And inside there was an unmarked door there. And it opens, and it's Richard Nixon's private hideaway office. And he's standing there, and he says, come on in, Merry Christmas. And I said, wow, this is like unbelievable. I mean, I've never talked to the guy, you know, I mean, so I was at the other side of the lens. He ushered us in. He said, I just wanted to say Merry Christmas and have you over. Now, anybody knows anything about Nixon would find this kind of peculiar, I think, that he would be choosing to spend time with some press people. And so he looks at everybody and says, well, I want to have you get a drink for you. And he looks right at me and he said, what would you like to drink? And, you know, I was not like a big drinker. And I'm thinking, what in the world am I the President of the United States just asked me what I want to drink, and I just thought, my dad drank martinis. Mr. President, I'll have a martini. He says, good choice. And he goes into this little hideaway kitchen, and he pulls out all his implements, and he takes a bottle off of the shelf, and it was Beefeaters. And he held it up like this, like an ad. He says, can't make a good martini without Beefeaters. And I'm going, wow, this is amazing. He brings a shaker out and puts the ice in and goes through the whole thing and gets some olives out in a martini glass and shakes it up and pours it in and plops the olive in there and hands it to me. And I'm just standing there, and he goes, you know, like, have a drink, you know? So I take a sip, and he looks at me, he says, how is it? And I said, that's good. He says, it's the only thing I do well. And that was it. And we stood around and talked with him. And he talked about baseball and this and that. And I thought, this is really one of the most incredible things. Because I'm a wire service driver. I'm a young kid. And here's the President of the United States. I mean, back then, that was like a really big deal. And because Nixon didn't just schmooze that much with anybody. But it's one of the most memorable experiences that I ever had with the president.
Wow, that's incredible. Tell us about.
But you didn't know he was a great martini maker.
Actually, he continued to make martinis well into the post-presidency, and
did.
was very proud of that.
Yep.
You were here with him when there was a school, I guess, and the birthplace. You have a photo. There's a photograph of him at the birthplace in '68. Tell us about that.
That's right. When I was visiting here earlier, we went into the Richard Nixon birthplace. I have a photograph I took of him, I think, and I honestly can't remember. It may have been 1970. You know what? Now that I think about it, it was because I think I was a pool photographer. I think it was on a trip in 1970 where he came out, and it may have been his first time to visit since he was the president. And we were inside when he came walking in the door, and I remember Dwight Chapin was in the photo. Like, he was the one that let him into the door, and he's kind of looking through the door. It's not a spectacular moment. It's not even a great picture, but and the one thing I remember is how just looking, I could see it in his eyes though, looking around in that little tiny house where he grew up, I guess the first 7 years of his life. I mean, it kind of reminded me of are you familiar with Gahan Wilson, the cartoonist? He was a student of Charles Adams, doing these macabre cartoons. But there's one of my favorite cartoons I remembered of his is this guy, grown-up person walks into this house, and is looking around, and it's his childhood home, and they're like, windowsills are way up there, and the chairs are these huge chairs, and he says, it's just exactly the way I remember it. And so I think I'm wondering what was going through Nixon's mind. I mean, here he's the president of the United States, and that house is really tiny. I mean, that must have been quite an experience for him.